Thank you so much for that. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And special thanks to Pete Calcano right here, who is kind enough to invite me. I am honored to be part of the Spaulding Lecture Series and honored and thrilled to be here with all of you at the College of Charleston. I have spent the last 40 years of my life in a very exciting place, Silicon Valley in Northern California. How many people here have been to Silicon Valley? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of us. You won't find Silicon Valley on any map. It's an unofficial designation. This is the San Francisco Peninsula with San Francisco at the top. San Jose is at the bottom. This is about 50 miles from north to south. It's full of high-tech companies. In San Francisco, we have such familiar names as these that are headquartered. On the peninsula, such familiar places, companies as these. You can see why Silicon Valley is regarded as the world's greatest innovation ecosystem. Well, to start us out, I'd like to take you back to the single year of my life where I learned the most about entrepreneurship, business, and life. And that year was 2000 and 2001, known as the dot-com bust. And amongst all these giants, I was running my second company, Customer Sat. That's short for customer satisfaction. We did online customer satisfaction measurement. I started the company in 1997. We were software as a service. We did, the field today is known as enterprise feedback management, automating the customer feedback processes for large companies. And in the first quarter of 2000, to set the stage, the internet was first commercially productized and made available in the 1990s. During that time, billions of dollars were invested and overinvested in the internet. Companies like eBay, Amazon, Google were all started during the 1990s. That huge overinvestment collapsed in what is known as the dot-com bust in 2000 and 2001. And then tens of thousands of companies, especially startups, started going out of business. In the first quarter of 2001, I would often wake up in sweat-soaked sheets sticking to my skin at 2 in the morning. Our second round of financing, our Series B round, refused to close despite a flurry of meetings with investors as we ran out of cash. Those nights I would get up, shower off the sweat, and try to get back to sleep. When my management team and I finally realized that our Series B round was not going to close, we huddled to figure out what to do. All of the investors were keeping their powder dry. They knew that with so many companies going out of business, there would be lots of great bargains for them to pick up in terms of investing in the next round. First, my management team and I, when we realized all this, cut our own salaries, and then a few weeks later, those of all of our employees by 10%. I cut my own salary by 50%. Agonizing and debating over every individual, we laid off 40% of our workforce. 40% of the company I had spent the last 3 years of my life building. When I assembled our remaining employees to explain to them that this was the only way we could stay afloat and stay together, I felt my composure collapsing, and I broke down sobbing in front of our employees. They stood there stunned, sympathetic, and embarrassed that their CEO was crying in front of them. That first quarter of 2001, our revenues fell by 20%. That's a lot for a recurring revenue software as a service model company. To help us get through, one of our investors lent me $300,000 for the company, but not to the company, rather for me to pass through to the company, meaning that I would be personally liable for repaying that loan. Later, I would repay that investor, to whom, despite the arrangement, I was deeply grateful, by mortgaging the townhouse that I lived in. To save on rent, we moved to the less attractive second floor of our building and rented out the ground floor to another startup. That startup quit paying us rent after 60 to 90 days, came in late one weekend night, cleared out all their belongings, and disappeared without a trace. To save on, to make payroll, we factored receivables. That is, we sold our future receivables for cash today at a 20% discount, an expensive maneuver that you don't want to do routinely. I reduced my salary to minimum wage, the legal limit. Finally, we could see profitability ahead in the third quarter of 2001. And then on September 11th, terrorists attacked the World Trade Center in New York City. The entire Northeast communications grid was down. It took an entire day just to confirm that all of our employees were still alive. Finally, the next day, I could announce all customer sat employees are safe. Even though we were 3,000 miles away on the west coast of the United States in Silicon Valley, even there, every company I know of had clients or customers who lost family members or employees in the terrorist attacks. If the dot-com bust of 2000 and 2001 did not kill a company, almost certainly the terrorist attacks of September 11th did. Well, we did not make a profit in that third quarter of 2001. We did break even in the fourth quarter. We didn't hire a single new employee for the next 18 months. The going kept tough for the next 2 to 3 years. But we made it through. And the company was acquired in the first quarter of 2008. Often I've wondered, why did customer sat survive when so many other companies of our size and cohort failed? I think it's fair to say most other companies. One of our investors later told me that customer sat was the only company they made money on during this interval. I absolutely don't think we were smarter than other management teams. We absolutely did not have more in the way of resources than other management teams did. Customer sat only raised $3 million in its entire life. One of our clients was Webvan, who raised $75 million before their initial public offering or IPO, and then several $100 million more in their IPO, and then famously declared bankruptcy 14 months after their IPO. So we didn't have more in the way of resources than other management teams did. Well, it was this question that led me to write this book, Unleash Your Inner Company. The book, I like to say the book contains as many of the mistakes that I've made over the last 40 years as I could squeeze into 400 pages. It's not all of the mistakes, but it's a sample of them so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. The book has a lot in it that I think you'll find is fresh. For example, the ideal company for you to start is absolutely unique to you. No one else has your unique combination of skills, knowledge, relationships, passions. And so the ideal company for you is specific to you and has to be discovered by you. Second, you have many more advantages to start a company and make it a success than you realize. And in this session today, I'll show you a technique for inventorying and cataloging all the resources that you have to start a company and make it a success. Next, positive feedback loops pervade many aspects of business and life. What do I mean by that? I mean people and things that reinforce each other. So a key to success is recognizing, nurturing, and riding these positive feedback loops, and I'll say more about that in just a moment. And finally, any business can be evolved and scaled into a large business if you want to. And in this session today, I don't have time to talk much about scaling up, but there are 2 whole chapters on that subject in the book. So why did customer sat survive when so many other companies failed? If I had to attribute it to just 2 factors, I would say it was these. Number 1, we cared more deeply about our business than other management teams did, about all aspects of it. The coolness of our products, the relationship with our customers, and about each other on our team more than other management teams did. And 2, we stuck with it longer than other management teams did. As I mentioned, it was another 7 years before the company was acquired. Many other teams just gave up or threw in the towel before that. So in short, I would say it was this combination of passion and perseverance that got us through. Passion is an attitude, perseverance is a behavior, and in many aspects of our lives, attitudes and behaviors reinforce each other, either positively or negatively. Every business book these days talks about the importance of passion. That's getting boring. Some business books also talk about the importance of perseverance. That's more interesting. No one is talking about how they form a positive feedback loop. If you just stick with something long enough so that you start to get good at it and then stick with it longer, start to get better at it, and then love it, that's an example of perseverance generating passion. Conversely, you know how, if you're already passionate about an activity, that the hours can go by like minutes when you're engaged in that activity. So that's an example of passion enabling perseverance. So you can see how the 2 reinforce each other. And if you can think of any aspect of your life where you have experienced this positive feedback between passion and perseverance, that's probably a really good area to consider starting a business. It could be in any realm of life. It could be in something you're studying, in sports, in gaming, in electronics, in fashion, travel, you name it. I think of passion and perseverance as broadly analogous to the north-south and east-west axes if you're trying to climb this mountain. If you can only move along one axis, it may be difficult or impossible to find a path that takes you all the way to the top. But if you have the flexibility to move along either axis, you can find a path that will take you all the way to the top. That's broadly analogous to how passion and perseverance work together. Why is passion so important in a startup? Let me give you 3 specific reasons. First of all, it gives you the staying power to break through obstacles. It's hard to start a new business, but you can do it. You'll run up against all of the obstacles that of the sort perhaps that I mentioned, having to lay off people, cut back salaries, move to smaller offices, all hard and humbling things to do. Passion and perseverance give you the staying power to break through those obstacles. 2, you have a time to market advantage in the areas that you're passionate about. What do I mean by that? I mean, you discover unsatisfied customer needs sooner, and so you can start addressing them sooner to be one of the first people or companies to enter that market. Why is that? Because of your passion, you're trying all the different features and functions of all the different products and services in that area, and you're bumping up against the limitations of those features and functions. Some of those limitations will be unsatisfied customer needs that other people will want to expand beyond those limitations as well. You discover them sooner by virtue of being passionate. Finally, your passion and perseverance are contagious to the other members of your team. And so there's a multiplicative effect. What if my passions are not very business-like? Let's say they're long hot baths, kittens, and comic books. These don't seem very business-like, do they? But even in these areas are an infinite number of unsatisfied customer needs. People like to listen to music, watch videos when they're in the tub, don't they? How about a floating waterproof case for my iPad or my iPhone so I can do those things in the tub? Kittens lose a lot of their cuddliness when they grow up to be cats, don't they? What if there was a diet or a genetic therapy that would keep a kitten its entire life? There'd be a lot of demand for that, wouldn't there be? Comic books, the hugely profitable trade show Comic-Con in San Diego, California, and now elsewhere in the world, each year attracts 150,000 people. People dress up as their favorite comic book characters. Hugely successful, hugely profitable. So you can see it doesn't matter what your passion is, there will be unsatisfied customer needs in those areas. I like to say that in your passion and perseverance, there are only two things you need to start a business and make it a success: a real unsatisfied customer need and an advantage for satisfying that need relative to others who would try to satisfy it. Now, you have tons of unsatisfied customer needs, even just in the areas you're passionate about. And you also have tons of advantages, as I'll say more about in just a moment. But the two are like puzzle pieces, and they have to fit together like that. So it's largely a process of search to find the two puzzle pieces that fit together the best. So we start out, the book lays out a 10-step process, starting out with finding a whole bunch of customer needs in areas that you're passionate about. We test them to make sure that they're real and unsatisfied. Real means that other people have them, not just you. And unsatisfied means that there aren't already products and services on the market that satisfy those needs. So it's the ones in the middle, the intersection, that we're interested in. Then we turn to the other puzzle piece. These are all of your resources. A subset of those will be applicable to any particular customer need, and a further subset will or may be advantages or an advantage for satisfying that need. Then we bring the two puzzle pieces together and look for the two puzzle pieces that fit each other the best. It's an iterative process because your resources are always changing. You're learning, you're doing market research, you're building prototypes, you're developing relationships with customers, you're bringing on team members, perhaps co-founders. And the customer needs are always changing because new customer needs are being created, existing customer needs are being satisfied by new products and services that come to the market. So it's an iterative process of refining the customer need and your resources to fit each other the best. We finally narrow it down to the one best fit. That's where you're most likely to be successful. And that's the business that we launch and scale up. And the book, this is the 10-step process the book lays out. You can see that it follows those 10 steps exactly. And if you look at the table of contents of the book, you'll see that it matches up with those, the chapters match up with those 10 steps. So I'm going to say just a bit about the customer need and then just a bit about your resources and advantages. First of all, the customer need. Now you'll notice I start with the customer need. Why is that? Well, I like to say I started my first company, Decisive Technology, with a really cool technology for which there was no market need. And it took me, I won't bore you with what the technology was. I had a patent on it. But it took me 6 to 9 months to let go of that idea and finally swap it for something for which there was a real market need, namely the ability to do surveys on the internet. This is way back in 1995, before very many people had access to the web. And so most email back in those days was still text rather than HTML. And so the software had to work by parsing text email messages to pull out survey responses and generate a simple set of analytics. That product became a hit at Decisive Survey, and that company is part of Google today. So it really does work. Start with the real unsatisfied customer need And that way you'll know that you are really satisfying a customer need. I like to say a customer need has two parts. Number one is the customer, and number two is the need. And I think it's helpful to always think of both of them. I much prefer the phrase customer need to market need, because market makes it easy to forget that the need is embodied in a real, living, breathing human being or group of human beings, such as a department in a business. And then the need, to be very clear, need not be something that we really need to live, like food, clothing, or shelter. It might be something very frivolous, like a rubber duck with your favorite Hollywood character's face on it. It's simply the difference between a preferred state and a current state. It's that gap is the need. And it may be your job as entrepreneur to educate or sell the customer on that need, even if they're not aware of it. And they may not be. Realize, though, if they're not, that may be a longer sales cycle. Sometimes I hear it said that it seems like all of the customer needs out there have already been satisfied. Do you agree with that statement? No, I don't either. Just the opposite. Yes, it's true that every time a new product or service comes to market, a customer need is being satisfied, or else the product or service would not sell. But here's the thing. Every time a new product or service comes to market, new needs are created in three different ways. Number one, the product or service itself can be improved. It can be made cleaner, smarter, faster, more intelligent. Whatever adjective can be meaningfully applied to it. Two, the companies that are providing those new products and services have needs for sales, marketing, inventory control, analytics, distribution. And three, very often new products and services create new needs around them. New mobile devices create the need for new carrying cases. Electronic vehicles create the need for charging stations. There have never been as many products and services on the market as there are today. And so there have never been as many opportunities for entrepreneurship as there are today, in my view. Now, whatever customer need you come up with in an area that you're passionate about, I want you to think big, supersize it. And this largest customer need that you can envision, that you might satisfy, can become or serve as the vision for your business. And first, I'd like to show you the wrong way to think big, and then the right way. First, the wrong way, and I hear this all the time. We're going to get 10% of a $1 billion market. So we're going to be a $100 million company. Well, that's really boring, because it doesn't tell me anything about how you're going to get there. A $100 million market is big enough to be of interest to the Fortune 500. How are you going to compete with them? They have much more in the way of resources than you do. So what's the right way to think big? Step by step, by upsizing either the customer set, the need itself, or both. And let me show you several different ways to think about that upsizing. You know how when you bowl, the bowling ball first knocks over the first pin, and that pin knocks over the next two pins, those pins knock over the next three pins, and so forth. Well, think of that overall market opportunity as a series of bowling pins, specific market segments. Which is the easiest one for you to knock over? That is, to gain significant presence in and satisfied customers in. And then once you've done that, what's the next market segment? Given the satisfied customers, knowledge, product experience, and so forth that you gain, what's the next bowling pin you could knock over, and the next one, and so forth? There are different ways you can define the bowling pins. It may be by geography. I just gave this presentation in Poland, and that's why I I have Polish cities on this chart, but think of the cities around here. First you gain a presence in this city, and then you customer experience and positive experiences, referenceable customers you gain, and experience can be applied to the next city and so forth. It may be by industry. This is actually how customer sat grew. First we got a critical mass of customers in technology, then expanded to telecom, then financial services, and so forth. Or if yours is a business to business, that is B2B, a product or service that you sell to businesses, it may be to departments in a large enterprise. In this case, customer service, and then expanding to sales and marketing. You might consider both at the same time. This is a real product, 2 Degrees Foods. They make fruit and nut bars. On the vertical axis, we have customer sets. On the horizontal axis, we have needs. When I did this chart with them initially, they had just, their product had been adopted by Whole Foods, a major supermarket chain. And so they did their best to predict how they would grow over the next 3 to 5 years. This is what they came up with. Expanding first to corporations, cafeterias, gyms and fitness stores, and then needs expanding, hunger for not just fruit and nut bars, but high protein and so forth. Now we don't have crystal balls, of course, and so this chart is likely to change over the next 3 to 5 years, isn't it? But it's still an extremely worthwhile exercise, because if we are currently at number 3 and we think we're going to number 4 and 5 next, that will affect a lot of the decisions and investments that we make today. If we are currently at number 3, we'll want to align those decisions and investments as best we can to be in the direction of 4 and 5. Now this is very impressive to a potential investor. It shows not only that you have thought about how your business is going to grow, or what the segments are that you want to address, but the order in which you want to address them. And it's much more impressive to a potential investor than just the one who says, we're going to get 10% of $1 billion market. The sum total of those different segments may well add up to 100, but you've done your homework to think about what's the easiest path to get there. Okay? One more thought on this topic. Shireen Yates is the lady shown here. She's CEO of NEMA Labs. Has anyone ever heard of celiac disease? Okay, several of us. Celiac disease is an allergy towards gluten, an inability to digest gluten. Shireen had that. She was in a marketing role, often had to eat out at restaurants, would often get sick. She wanted to do something about it. Her parents had been bakers, and so she thought she would, at first, create a bakery and then a chain of bakeries where you could be assured that the products and services, the breads and other products from the bakery were gluten-free. And then she would expand that network worldwide. Well, that's great, but there are 2 challenges with that. Number 1 is it requires a huge investment to build a global network or even a national network of bakeries. And 2, it doesn't really address the real problem, which is, if I'm eating out in a restaurant, how do I know that the food there is gluten-free? The restaurant may say they buy items from the bakery, but it could have been contaminated in the restaurant's kitchen. Some of the products in the restaurant may not have been purchased from that bakery. So she worked backwards from that vision to come up with a different path to it. And that is providing a device that would test for gluten. She teamed up with a mechanical engineer and a chemical engineer, and together they developed this handheld device. You put a sample of the food in it. It takes a minute or two to perform tests on it, and then it gives you either a green light or a red light, whether you can eat it or not, depending upon whether it has gluten in it. Well, this product is a high-value product, can be manufactured very cost-effectively. It has a lot of intellectual property in it. It can be licensed worldwide. This is a much more scalable business than she originally was conceiving. And so think backwards from your vision and find a path to it. That's all I'm going to say about the customer need. Let me turn to the other puzzle piece, which is your resources and advantages. And to start that out, I'm going to take you back 400 years to what is today Hyderabad, India. 400 years ago, in Hyderabad, there was a successful farmer who ran a large and successful farm, very wealthy. And he was approached by an ancient Buddhist priest. The priest happened to mention to him that anyone who could find diamonds could become the wealthiest person in the world. Well, the farmer got really enamored with that idea, thought about it day and night, couldn't get it out of his mind, and finally decided to go for it. And so he assembled a team of mining experts, bought the necessary equipment, sold his farm, and spent the next 20 years traversing the vast Asian, North African, and European continents in search of diamonds. At the end of 20 years, he had found none. And at that time, he stood on a steep cliff overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, penniless, friendless, afflicted. And as he stood there, a huge wave came up beneath his feet. And in his utter desperation, he threw himself off that cliff into that wave, disappeared beneath its foaming crest, and was never seen again. Sometime later, that same ancient Buddhist priest came by the farm that he sold, visited with the new farmer. The new farmer had been out in the fields, tilling them. A stream ran through those fields. He noticed a funny black rock in the stream. He reached in, brought it out, and about the size of a baseball, it had what appeared to be an eye that reflected all of the colors of the rainbow. He thought that was unusual, so he put it in his pocket, brought it back to the farmhouse, set it down on a table, and forgot about it. When that ancient Buddhist priest stopped by for a visit, he saw the rock on the table and recognized a diamond in its original unprocessed form. And he asked the farmer if there were any other stones like that. The farmer didn't know. So the two men rushed out to the fields and discovered they were covered with diamonds. Acres and acres of diamonds, tens of thousands of diamonds. That farm became Golconda, near what is today Hyderabad, India, the most prolific diamond mine in the world, in history, from which the crown jewels of England, Germany, and many other countries were mined. If the first farmer had just realized all of the resources he had already, he would have been the wealthiest man in the world. Similarly, each and every one of us in this room has acres of diamonds, resources that we can bring to bear to start our companies and make it a success. And right now, I'm going to show you a way to remember and catalog them. Oops. I use the acronym STARS to remember them. Your skills, the technologies you know about, your assets and accomplishments, your relationships and reputation, and your strengths, as in inner strengths. It spells the word STARS with 2 A's and 2 R's. And regardless of where you are in life, whether you plan to start a business or not, a very worthwhile exercise is to either take out a big sheet of paper and put 7 columns on it, 1 for each of those words, or if you wish, use a spreadsheet and make the 7 columns in the spreadsheet, put one of those words at the top of each column, and under each one, write down as many of resources that you have that you can think of. It's a good exercise to do with somebody who knows you well, because they will see strengths and resources in you that you don't see in yourself. Here's an example. Your skills and technologies include those that you have learned about both by formal study and just because you're passionate about them and have learned a lot about them. Your assets may be financial, they may be physical, like a computer or a smartphone, or they may be knowledge-based. For example, your knowledge, your intimate knowledge of the city of Charleston. Your accomplishments are there to build your self-confidence. Your relationships are there because successful accomplishments in one field often spill over to other fields. Relationships are both personal and professional. Reputation, how other people know you, and strengths are qualities that you've demonstrated, like creativity, ingenuity, compassion, perseverance, passion, and so forth. Put them all down, whether they seem relevant to starting a business or not. We don't know at this early stage what business you're going to start, and any one of those resources might be relevant. We use this chart in 4 different ways in the 10-step process. Number 1, to assess the fit between you and each of the unsatisfied customer needs you've identified. 2, to see where the gaps are, to see what additional resources you need to develop or acquire to best satisfy that customer need. 3, to innovate. And innovation is largely a process of taking things you already know and combining them in novel ways. This chart lays out what you already know. And finally, 4, to build your self-confidence. It's hard to start a business, as I've said, but you can do it. This chart reminds you of all the resources you have. How about your failures? Should they go on your STARS chart? And I would say yes, if you learned from them. Let's say that first blue circle in the upper left represents what you know you can do. And now you try something new in the next shape, and you're successful. Great. You've expanded what you know you can do with a given set of resources. You try again in that same direction, and you're successful again. Great. You've further expanded what you know you can do. Then you try again in that same direction, and this time you fail. Okay, you've discovered that you cannot achieve whatever you wanted to achieve given that with that set of resources. Then you shift to a different direction and try again and fail again. All right, you've learned that this cannot be achieved with whatever resources you applied. Then in the same direction, you apply more in the way of resources, perhaps set your goals more modestly, and this time you're successful. Great. Well, notice that what you know you can do with a given set of resources now is about 3 times what it was when you started out. The person who tries lots of things, whether or not they succeed or fail, has it all over the person who never tries. The person who never tries anything new, their knowledge never goes beyond that original circle, does it? But yours has. This helps you in 2 different ways. Number 1, it expands what you know you can do with a given set of resources. And 2, it helps you know broadly, makes you a better judge of what in general can be achieved with a given set of resources by anyone. That makes you a better manager, executive, and potential investor. So each and every one of us, there may be an optimal mix for each and every one of us that's different for each of us between successes and failures. Because think about it. If you've tried a whole bunch of things in a row and everyone has been successful, maybe you're not stretching far enough or taking enough risk. Conversely, if you've tried a whole bunch of things in a row and they've all failed, maybe you need to set your sights more modestly and plan to apply more in the way of resources to address that need. So you can see how there may well be an optimal mix between successes and failures for all of us. Okay. I mentioned that the STARS chart can be used to innovate. And this is an example. This person has experience in medical services, chemistry degree, knows conversational Spanish and so forth. Look for combinations of resources that might satisfy a customer need and try to think of a need that your unique combination might satisfy. In this case, automatic English-Spanish translation or same-day home delivery of prescription drugs. Here's what is for me an inspiring thought. Nobody else has your exact STARS chart. And so there is probably some need out there that you are the very best person in the world to satisfy. And we have to discover it. Particularly helpful for finding customer needs that your resources can satisfy are the new skills and new technologies on your STARS chart. Let's say that these are all of your skills and technologies. Well, quite a few of them are probably new. In this case, natural language processing or ChatGPT and so forth. Let's say that 1 and 2 are each new technologies that you know about. And they're both growing rapidly because they're so new. They may or may not overlap yet. The overlaps, by overlap I mean there may or may not be any products and services yet on the market that embody both of those technologies. Well, if the two technologies are both getting larger, the intersection between the two will start small, but will be growing even faster. If you can meaningfully combine a third technology, that intersection between all three of them will be even smaller, but will be growing even faster still. These intersections between new technologies harbor particularly good entrepreneurial opportunities. So I encourage you to try to stay abreast of any new technologies that are either within or adjacent to whatever the primary customer need is that you're interested in applying, addressing, or area that you're passionate about. How many people here have played around with ChatGPT, for example? Okay, virtually all of us. You know, it's very timely. Try all the different new AI tools. Get a sense for which ones are better. Think about how you might incorporate ChatGPT into your startup. Building your self-confidence. I've said this again and again. It's hard to do, but you can do it. And of course, as we go through life, address challenges, gain experience, we naturally, our self-confidence naturally grows. But is there a way to accelerate the process? I think there is, using some techniques which I'll share with you here. And there's a whole chapter on the book, in the book, the chapter 7, Growing Your Mind from the Inside Out. is the name of that chapter. I served as president and chair of the worldwide MIT Alumni Association while I was writing the book. And I got to meet and learn from many MIT professors. One of them was Professor Anne Graybill in brain and cognitive science. Professor Graybill says, for example, the only way to break a bad habit is to start a new habit. The brain is like an iceberg. We're only consciously aware of about 10% of the messages that come into our, that we sense. The other 80 or 90% are something we heard out of the corner of our eye, something that we heard without thinking about it consciously, these ideas, which we unconsciously absorb, are in some cases harmful to us. In particular, negative things that we say about ourselves again and again, the unconscious mind eventually absorbs and then accepts as truth, and they become self-fulfilling truths. So the first principle here in this section is never say anything negative about yourself. If necessary, use the past tense. I used to be this way, but I'm becoming more, I'm becoming better. To be very clear, I'm not worried about what other people might think about you. I'm worried about what your most important audience thinks about you, namely your unconscious mind. Whenever one of these negative thoughts might creep into your head, I'm no good at sports, I'm no good at directions, no good at social situations, think of a specific time, no matter how small, where you did the opposite. If it was a social situation, you put everyone at ease. If it was the math, you were able to do it in your head. If it was a sport, you were the star that day. If it was getting somewhere, you were able to get there without using Google Maps. Write down every detail of that incident, no matter how small. If you have a photo or trophy that reflects it, put that in a prominent place so you can think about it. Think about it as you're falling asleep. Let that become your new reality and press the negative thought out of your mind. Never say anything negative about yourself. Again, not for the benefit of how other people will perceive you, but how your most important audience, namely your unconscious mind, will perceive you. If there's some aspect of yourself that you genuinely cannot change, find a way to view it as an asset. When I was in my mid-30s, I accepted the fact that I'm gay. Most people would not view that as an asset. I disagree. For me, it's been an asset in 5 different ways. Number 1, when you're growing up gay, you know unambiguously, with absolute certainty, that at least some of the world's routine assumptions are wrong. People routinely assume that guys are attracted to gals and vice versa, don't they? But you know it's not universally correct. And so that has helped me not necessarily accept the status quo and think outside the box. That's made me a better entrepreneur and manager. 2, it wasn't socially acceptable to be openly gay when I was growing up in southern Florida. And so at least some of the energy I might have put into dating, I put into sports, studying, career. Today, 30 plus years later, I'm hugely enjoying the benefit of that early investment. 3, I'm not a minority in any sense that I can think of other than being gay, and so it has sensitized me to some of the challenges minorities face. 4, when people see that I'm not trying to hide my sexual orientation, they can see I'm being honest with them, and that helps build trust between us. And 5, I think it further conveys that I have strength in reserve if I can be open about the fact that I'm gay. Similarly, if there is any aspect of yourself that you genuinely cannot change, your height, your skin color, the fact that your parents were incarcerated, whatever it is, find a way to view it as an asset. Set the bar very high. Don't use this as an excuse to accept some aspect of yourself that you can change and would like to change. But if you genuinely cannot change it, if you can find a way to view it as an asset, it'll be hugely empowering for you, as it was for me, and that aspect of yourself will become one of your strengths. A few years ago, I was giving this exact same talk to an auditorium of undergraduates in Guatemala. And about halfway back in the auditorium was a young man, and as I spoke, he gently made a fist like this and pressed it against his chest like this. And at first, I thought it was some small gesture of agreement or support for what I was saying. But then, when I looked again, I could see he wasn't making a fist at all. His hand had no fingers on it. And I imagine he was saying, this I cannot change. This is my strength. So again, if there's some aspect of yourself you genuinely cannot change, find a way to view it as an asset. It will become one of your assets. How many people here use PowerPoint? Raise your hand. All right, virtually all of us. Well, here's a PowerPoint tip. Add a kitten, cat, or puppy to your slide to improve your audience's engagement with it. But this is not about the cat. Do you see the point on the carpet up there? I can't lift up that point very high, can I? Unless I also lift up all the points around it. Well, we're all like the points on that carpet. I can't lift myself up very high unless I also lift up the people around me. And so even if I see just a glimmer of creativity or good judgment or perseverance in the people around me, letting them know that I see it helps build that strength in them. And that brings good people to me because people want to be around people who help them become even better. And that elevates each of us to a position of leadership. So look for and find the good in those around us. When we complain or criticize, endorphins flow to our brains, and for all of 5 seconds, we feel a sense of well-being and superiority. But after that 5 seconds, the endorphins fade away. We lose that sense of superiority and well-being, and the person that we have criticized has been demoralized. The net outcome of this can only be negative. There are lots of other techniques that are better. Asking questions, articulating the consequences of an action, focusing on and celebrating the good. Try these instead. Finally, what does the word ethical mean? Well, there are many definitions. Here are some of the ones that you might come up with or that I might come up with. Honest, respectful, law-abiding, caring, and so forth. I like all of those definitions, and I aspire to all of those definitions. Using these definitions of the word ethical, I don't think entrepreneurs are any more or less ethical than people in other fields. But I do think there is another sense of the word ethical in which entrepreneurship is a uniquely ethical career. And that is because entrepreneurs find new solutions to existing customer and human needs. And that makes the world a better place in 2 different ways. Number 1, directly, because the customer is satisfying the customer need. That benefits the customer and, of course, the entrepreneur because the entrepreneur is being paid. But it also benefits all of us indirectly because the entrepreneur has created a new win-win situation which did not exist before. A new opportunity for collaboration that benefits both parties that did not exist before. A zero-sum situation is where one person wins and the other doesn't. A zero-sum is where both of us lose out. So if you have a pound of meat and I steal it from you, that's zero-sum because I have the meat now and you don't. If we get in a fight over that meat and we both end up with black eyes or worse, that's a negative-sum situation because we both ended up worse than we were before. A voluntary transaction must be a win-win situation, or else the transaction would not take place. And so by creating a new win-win, the customer benefits, the entrepreneur benefits, and actually the whole world benefits because now, instead of directly competing with each other, we can each be excellent in different ways. All of that entrepreneurship creates win-wins. Innovation enables the entrepreneurship. That creates win-wins. That drives economic growth, which leads to higher standards of living and higher quality of life. So here's a new definition for ethical, that which shifts a zero-sum or negative-sum situation to positive-sum. The late, great CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, was often criticized for not being very ethical because he wasn't very philanthropic. And it's true, he was not very philanthropic in his lifetime, even though he was a billionaire. His wife has since become a major philanthropist in Silicon Valley. And of course, the entrepreneurship enables most philanthropy. But even without that, look at all the good that Steve Jobs did in his life. Going way back to the beginning, he made computing easy and usable so that those of us without degrees in computer science could use computers, using the mouse, using the bitmapped graphics display. Prior to that, we had to learn MS-DOS, a command line interpreter, which was cumbersome. Whole new industries opened up, desktop publishing, the ability to design. People could become independent owners of their own businesses using the tools that Apple provided. The iPod enabled you to carry entertainment around in your pocket. FaceTime enabled you to communicate and keep in touch with friends and loved ones. If you consider the entire supply chain from the components to the sub-assemblies, to the assemblies, to the systems, to the apps, millions of people have been employed as a result of Apple, and thousands of millionaires have been created thanks to Apple. So he did tremendous good in his life, even without his philanthropy that he enabled, just by finding and addressing unsatisfied customer and human needs. You and I, and each and every one of us, can do the same on whatever scale we wish to. We don't need credentials, even though you have impressive credentials, or will have from the College of Charleston. We don't need permission. We just need to go out there and do it. So go out there and have fun doing it. Thanks so much for having me. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Where can I buy the book?
Amazon. It's available in hardcover, paperback, audio, Kindle. Take your pick. And there's also, I'm leaving this copy in the Dean's Library, as I understand it. And so it will be accessible to anyone who wants to look at it there. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Back to the very beginning when you had to go through that hardship with your company and going through the layoffs, was there any part where you had seriously considered just stopping and giving up? And what caused you to not ultimately do that?
You know, it's funny, when I had to mortgage I've mortgaged my home twice for two different companies, both Decisive and Customer Sat. And all I cared about was whether I could get that loan from that company, from the bank. I didn't care about the possibility of losing my home. I mean, in retrospect, it seems hugely imprudent, to say the least. But you know, when I was in the thick of it, I just knew or was confident I could make the company work if I could just get funding. And I had to go to all through those machinations to factor receivables, which is a complex process. I didn't mention it, but I also had to grant warrants to the company that granted us the receivables, which meant I ended up giving up some of the stock in the company to them, but we made it through. Related to your question, which is a really important question, is how do I know when to throw in the towel, and generally, or if I should throw in the towel, or should I stick with it? It's a good question. If you're just not making any progress, you just can't sell that first product or get enough revenue to break even or whatever, I usually find, first of all, let me say, I think we tend to err on the side of giving up too early rather than giving up too late. And so be sensitive to that. But if you're just not making any progress, it's usually because you're not hewing, that is sticking, close enough to the unsatisfied customer need. And in the book, I talk about scaling up or down the customer need. And there are times when you may need to scale it down. You may not be able to serve the needs of all of South Carolina. You may need to focus just on Charleston. You may not be able to meet the needs of your customer in the entire city of Charleston, maybe just a certain neighborhood. You may not be able to even do that neighborhood. Maybe you can only serve the needs of one office building. You may not be able to do that whole office building. Maybe you can only serve the needs of one floor of that building. Maybe you can't even do that floor. Maybe it's just one company on that floor. So that's okay. Think of it as you're getting down to whatever is the lowest hanging fruit that you can satisfy. And there may not be a big enough opportunity there for you, but at least this is a way to discover that. And if you've gone through the systematic process of downsizing to ever lower hanging fruit, and then you still can't make a profit or a go of it, then that's a time to let go. Say. Did I see another? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
When did you know you wanted to become an entrepreneur? Or was that a path that you saw in undergrad, or when did you?
Well, it's definitely part of my application to business school, which is, I was 21 or 22. So definitely then. I think when I was growing up, what I wanted to be was an inventor. I liked taking things apart, trying to figure out how they worked. And I think being an inventor evolved into becoming an entrepreneur. So from a young age, I guess. But on the other hand, I don't think I'm naturally cut out to be an entrepreneur. I like to say I had a great advantage starting my first company. I was fired from my previous job. And originally, I wasn't planning on starting a business. I was just planning on looking for another job. Along the way, I had a chance to do some consulting. So I did the consulting, I made some money, I learned some good things, and then I went back to looking for a job again. Then I had a chance to do more consulting, did that. Eventually, I just kept on consulting and forgot about looking for a new job, and my first company, Decisive, I evolved into from the consulting practice. So you can do the same thing, even if you don't think you're naturally. Actually, I think we are all designed to be entrepreneurs. Some people have the idea you have to be born an entrepreneur to become an entrepreneur. I don't buy that. Because think about it. If you go back 5,000 years, all of us were entrepreneurs. If we didn't hunt for food or meat or collect fruits and berries, we wouldn't survive. So it's just that there are, in the last 5,000 years, easier paths have become available where we don't have to do that stuff. But if you take the easier paths away, I think the entrepreneurial instincts will come back. Yes?
How did you celebrate when you sold that company?
It's funny, well, which one?
The 2008.
So I originally I did not want to sell the company. I was happy running it, but one of my investors, Ernie Pomerantz from Warburg Pincus, very experienced entrepreneur, called me and he said, "John, you know, it's been 7 years since we raised money. You can't keep your investors on hold indefinitely. You have to provide liquidity for them at some point." And we weren't big enough to go public, and so it meant selling the business. And at first I was really reluctant. But as we went through the process and I started to think about what I would be able to do, the freedom I would have after we sold the business, I got more and more excited about it. And the deal closed on March 31st, 2008. In retrospect, the timing was good because later that year, as you know, there was a financial crisis and a huge downturn. Anyway, I before it closed on March 30th, I had my fingers crossed that nothing would interfere with it, and indeed it went through. And then the next year I spent running customer sat as executive VP and general manager of the customer sat unit of Market Tools. And that was a very different experience. All throughout the courting process of Market Tools to acquire us, they assured me that our company cultures were so similar. Well, after we were acquired, I discovered they could not be more different. Market Tools, which has since also been acquired, was in the business. They were one of the pioneers and one of the largest companies, if not the largest, in online market research. They were interested in us because they did not have an offering in the customer satisfaction measurement segment. But they were, being market research project oriented, their typical engagement with customers lasted 90 to 180 days, 1 or 2 quarters. Whereas we put in place processes, we provided through SaaS feedback, continuous feedback to companies at every touch point between the company and their customers. It may be the call center, the website, the customer service center, customer support, returns, you name it. And if we're doing a good job, as long as our clients' companies' business processes do not change, we should be in there indefinitely. And so if we're doing a good job, we're going to have a healthy, continuous revenue stream. So we're quite comfortable losing money for the first quarter or two because we know we're going to make it up. Market Tools has to make money every time. In spite of this, we were more profitable when we were acquired than Market Tools was. So anyway, this made it challenging. And anyway, I got through it. But after we were acquired, whereas previously I'd been focused on new products and customer relationships, afterwards it was more on revenue recognition, integrating IT systems, integrating financial systems, and that was my penance, I think, of that 1 year. Anyway, we got through it. Pete's telling me that my time is up. It's been wonderful being here with all of you. Thanks so much for having me. Good luck to you.